Welcome back, my lovely humans, to Mystery March Mondays. Today, when I'm filming, is actually Sunday the 9th, but when you're watching this, it is Monday the 10th, 2025 of March, and we are going to have a tale of Karen Read. I'm going to give a story mode / lore perspective of the Karen Read trial. I have been following this and doing summary and update videos for a long time. This is not going to be a what happened in court per se. It will get thrown into there here and there. I'm going to be as objective as I can in telling this story mode of the Karen Read trial and John O'Keefe. Do you want to keep in mind that I am not a legal expert or professional in any way, shape, or form. I am just a person who is a court enthusiast who watches a lot of trials, and I will leave all of my links below. And also, just for additional transparency, after watching the entirety of the original Karen Read trial and all after motions and pretrial hearings that have been occurring, I've been doing summary updates that are all publicly accessible information, and again, links below. But I also do have a personal bias in thinking and believing that Karen Read is not guilty. So I just want to make sure to throw that out there. I'm not trying to use this to sway anybody's mind. I'm not trying to be persuasive one way or the other. I am just going to be telling you the story of what happened, again, as objectively, as possible. And that is the goal of this. I thought it would be a fun little mystery march thing to do, to tell this ongoing mystery tale of what happened between Karen Read and John O'Keefe. Which, spoiler, we don't know yet. It begins 4 Januaries ago on this date, January 28th, 2022, in Canton, Massachusetts, which is near Boston, Massachusetts. There was an incoming snowstorm, so a bunch of people, Officer John O'Keefe, a well-respected member of the community who wanted to do good for his community by becoming an officer. He was also renowned for his honor of adopting his niece and nephew when his sister and brother-in-law passed away within months of each other. And he had begun having a relationship with accountant Karen Read. Karen Read was a woman who had some health issues and, to some people, some mental issues. She has been repeatedly shown to be very jealous and volatile in her emotions, being very lovey and sweet one minute and closed off the next. They had a lot of tumultuous things happen in their relationship because of her jealous rages, and also because of him having children, being a father-like figure in their lives. They had a lot of arguments regarding the children. Karen Read wanting more personal and intimate time as a couple, which is hard to come by when there are children involved. And many people had told her, you knew he had children and that he's doing the parent thing. You put yourself in that situation. And parents just don't get a lot of personal, alone, and one-on-one time because children have to be the priority. There was also the problem of when she did try to bond and do the partial mother person in their life thing, John O'Keefe would get mad at her, accusing her of spoiling the children, buying them things they didn't need or buying things like Dunkin' Donuts too often. So the two did not have a calm relationship by any means, but they did seem to have an on and off relationship that seemed to be on in January 28th, 2022. When they were off, however, because many of their friends and associates were other cops or people in the field and their wives, she had gotten to know another officer named Brian Higgins, and there had been speculation and even text messages showing a flirty relationship between Brian Higgins and Karen Read on occasion when her and John O'Keefe were off, and even said that they had shared a kiss at another function. During one of their on times on January 28th, 2022, Brian Higgins, and a bunch of their other friends, including Officer Brian Albert, his wife Nicole Albert, her sister John McCabe, her husband Matt McCabe, and a whole bunch of other friends and family members of theirs were out celebrating before the snowstorm that was coming in. They were at a couple bars, and then they were going to continue their celebrations of the girls' basketball team win and one of the Albert McCabe's children's birthdays. They were all going back to Brian and Nicole Albert's to continue partying and celebrating. That was the initial plan. But Karen Reed, also a woman of many health problems, had chosen to not continue to go to the Alberts' house, but instead dropped John O'Keefe off at the Alberts' residence and then went back to his house. However, the next morning, she wakes up in a panic, a little foggy brained from being hungover. Where was he? John never came home. She called and left a very jealous-induced voicemail accusing him of sleeping with someone she knew he just wanted to go to be with someone else. And if that wasn't the case, why had nobody, including John O'Keefe, called or texted her, letting her know, hey, John's like crashing on so-and-so's couch, or whatever? Not being able to get a hold of him, she panicked and tried to contact other people. So another friend of John O'Keefe's and Jen McCabe got back to Karen Reed, and the three of them went on a search for John O'Keefe. Jen McCabe had mentioned and reminded Karen that she had dropped off John at the Alberts' house, so they went to go check it out. And when they got there, in the middle of the Alberts' yard was John O'Keefe, covered in snow from the snowstorm. Karen Reed jumped out of the car and was panicking, freaking out. Obviously, her boyfriend was not moving and covered in snow in the middle of January in Massachusetts. She tried to warm him up with skin-to-skin contact before starting to do CPR on him. 911 was called, and when EMTs and other first responders arrived, she was covered in his blood, still trying to give him CPR. She was relieved of her CPR duties. John O'Keefe was loaded up into an emergency vehicle, and the lead investigator who came to the scene, Trooper Proctor, had determined that Karen Reed was in such a state they couldn't get anything out of her. She was just so inconsolable and incomprehensible that he ordered her to be put on a psych hold, and that her Lexus was brought and impounded at the police station. The police station had a garage called the Sallyport where her vehicle was kept during the investigation, roughly for 48 hours. She was let out of her psych hold after 24 hours once she had calmed down and was able to speak clearly and coherently again, and possibly once the hangover had subsided a little more. And it wasn't long after that when Karen Reed was arrested and charged with the second-degree murder of John O'Keefe. The situation that the investigation had so far shown up was that Karen Reed dropped John O'Keefe off at the Alberts' residence, but before he made it inside, because they were having an argument, another jealous-induced argument, because Karen Reed wanted to just go home and wanted John to go back with her, and John wanted to keep partying and hanging out with his friends. So in an angry rage when they were on their way, or before they went, Karen Reed had thrown a glass at her taillight, breaking it. And when she got to the residence to drop John off, possibly giving him one more chance to come back home with her instead, she backed into him with her car, allegedly, rendering him unconscious, and then left him to die in the snow and didn't realize what she had done and was remorseful the next morning. Other charges that she had received included DUI and being a catalyst for his death. If she had not dropped him off at the residence, then nothing would have happened to him, kind of thing. She was also charged with negligent homicide of not only hitting him with her car, but also just leaving him there and not going back for him or calling for help a little while later. Just left him to die in the snow. Karen Reed and her defense team have developed a different story to tell. They say that there's too many suspicious circumstances around the Alberts, the police station, and that this has been a cover-up for what happened in the Alberts' residence to blame Karen Reed. Many of the residents during the investigation who had attended the party at the Alberts' house, the Alberts, their children, family members, the McCabe's, they all said, no, John never showed up to the Alberts' house. They thought he was going to. There was talk and intention of him being there, but no one recalled really seeing him there. People remember seeing Karen Reed's car, or what they thought was her black car, at night or in the middle of the night, but they never recalled really actually seeing John in the house. And they don't remember seeing Karen at all, outside of they thought her black car had pulled up. John O'Keefe's injuries are suspicious for the investigator's tale. Karen Reed had supposedly backed into him and hit a fully grown male so hard that he was rendered unconscious with blunt force trauma to the back of the head, and the broken taillight supposedly caused by the broken glass that Karen Reed had thrown at it, or the glass she had thrown at it. He had cuts on the inner part of his right forearm. Those were the only injuries that he had, and his ultimate cause of death by the medical examiner was determined to be hypothermia. He just couldn't warm up or get up out of the cold after he had been made unconscious. She had also determined that his death couldn't be determined. She couldn't tell if it was an accident or a homicide, ruling out self-harm as what happened to John O'Keefe. Karen Reed's defense team says that lead investigator Trooper Proctor has friendships and affiliations with the Alberts and the McCabe's, which they all denied, Trooper Proctor himself included. However, there are pictures of him being involved in some of the weddings, his children being a ring bearer at a wedding, them going on vacation and hanging out together. One of the other Alberts, who also works in the police department, being someone he went to the gym with on a regular basis and went out to the bar with and hung out with. And he says that that's not really closeness. Trooper Proctor also had shown voicemails and text messages saying things like, "Pin it on the girl," less than 24 hours into the investigation, and even calling Karen Reed a whack job and a "see you next Tuesday" in these text messages to civilians and other work buddies who weren't on the case. Even further, that even though all of the Alberts, McCabe's, and etc. had claimed that they never saw John O'Keefe go into the house, the wounds that were on John O'Keefe's inner forearm had been expressed to be by dog bite wound experts and other medical experts that they seemed to be dog bite wounds, or at least similar to dog bite wounds, and that John O'Keefe's injuries were not similar to being hit by a car. For a fully grown man to be hit by a car hard enough to push him from the curb to the middle of the yard, rendering him unconscious, would take more force than the rest of the damage to his body would show, as he had none. It's very unusual to be hit by a car and the middle of your body not have any injuries whatsoever. The matter of the dog bite wound possibly being the cause of the inner arm injuries is also in reference to, at the time, the Alberts had a German Shepherd named Chloe. Chloe had been known mostly to be aggressive towards other animals, but also to be unfriendly towards people she didn't know very well, and she wasn't super familiar with John O'Keefe. The defense team paints a picture for Karen Reed that after she dropped John O'Keefe off at the Alberts' house to let him party and she drove back home, he did enter the residence. Maybe he got in a fight with one of the other people there, got into an argument with Brian Higgins, perhaps. And the dog got angry and tried to protect someone she knew, or just the dog went after John O'Keefe without any provocation from other people whatsoever. But either way, perhaps John O'Keefe defensively put his arms up which would explain why he had wounds and cuts just on his inner forearm. And that because Chloe, being a German Shepherd, knocked him backwards and he hit his head on something, and then the Alberts and McCabe's dragged him outside to not be affiliated or have anything happen to them or to Chloe. Although they all claim that he never went into the house, there isn't any way to prove if he was or wasn't in the house other than by hearsay or word of mouth. Chloe was rehomed shortly after the incident occurred to some place in Vermont. Been ongoing litigation about whether or not Chloe was the cause of the wounds or not. There's also been speculation and motions put forth by the defense that because the Alberts, McCabe's, and etc. were all allowed to be interviewed at once by the investigators, that they couldn't get a true and accurate account of what happened, and that everyone was able to make up a similar story to keep telling in reports over and over. There was also video from the Sally Port that was corrupted, but before those things could be examined by defense experts, the cameras had been disposed of. There was also problems with evidence and video evidence being turned over during and even after the first trial that had taken place over the summer of 2023. And that video evidence was continuing to mysteriously trickle in from the prosecution, called the Commonwealth in Massachusetts, in October of 2024, in August of 2024, and even into January and February of 2025. There's a new trial date set for April 1st when jury selection is supposed to begin for the second wave of trial. And there has been many causes of dismissal for the second trial to even take place. The first trial that took place had landed in a hung jury. They were also baffled and confused by the evidence and not fully persuaded, or all of them fully persuaded one way or the other, about who was, in their eyes, based on the evidence presented, responsible for the death of John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe's family had tried to make civil litigation against Karen Read, but because there's an ongoing trial, and at the time there was an ongoing federal investigation, those things were all put on hold because you can't blame someone for something in civil court that they have not been charged for in criminal court. It had even been speculated that the presiding judge, Judge Beverly Cannone, has affiliations with either the police department or the prosecution, aka Commonwealth, and that she should have recused herself and had been offered to recuse herself from the case, although she had refused to do so. The most recent upcomings is that Judge Cannone was seemingly showing her bias, alleged bias, against Karen Read and the defense team by saying that some biomedical experts that had been hired by the federal investigators, called ARCA, were not allowed to make opinions about the injuries to John O'Keefe because despite having the expertise and the knowledge, etc., to be able to make opinions about injuries, she had refused, claiming that Massachusetts law doesn't allow non-doctor medical doctors to make medical opinions on medical injuries. However, she allowed there to be a rebuttal witness against a defense witness, Dr. Crosby, who is not a medical doctor, to make opinions about the injuries. Judge Cannone has also been pointed out to have some other discrepancies, but is also just seems to be a very thorough judge who's following the law and making allowances that would seem fit, because you are allowed to have rebuttal experts to combat the words of another expert, so that there is an equal opinion being shared to the jury and allowing the jury to determine whose findings are more believable and credible, for they are the finders of fact and they listen to the evidence, and that there has to be someone who is allowed to make counter arguments of well, this could also be a plausible thing that happened. So, is Judge Canone being biased towards the defense? Is Karen Reed being set up by the entire police department in Commonwealth because she's an outsider with a bad temper? Or did she truly just let her bad temper and her jealousy get the better of her being in an intoxicated state and really did hit John O'Keefe and leave him to die in the snow? Did something happen in the Alberts' residence that all of them want to keep hush hush and are trying to pin it on Karen Reed? That's up for the jury, the upcoming jury, to determine, and hopefully we get a determination then. I'm sure that Karen Reed is overpaying for these expenses, and I'm sure John O'Keefe's family is ready for there to be some resolutions. So, justice for John O'Keefe, and let's hope that by the end of this second trial, we find some truth. There's new experts and new evidence that is being brought in, so hopefully more light will be shed. What do you think? Is Karen Reed being the fall girl for the police department? Or is she a woman with jealousy and regret? That's up to you and the jury to decide. I'll see you the next time. Bye.